think the first protesters have already been arrested, and more oppression might be in the cards. He was put in jail as well, actually twice, and later, during his second term, he was deported to the United States, where he is living in exile ever since. Now he is on the road talking about China and his view on China, and now today he is our guest and will talk to us about how he sees China to develop in the future and what role China will play in the international community. Please give our guest a very warm welcome.
Thank you, Martin, for the introduction. It's my truly honor to be here again. It's not the first time I've been here, maybe the third or fourth time. I planned this visit, actually it's a long time ago. The purpose is not to give this press conference because at that time, not so many things happened. My main purpose of this visit to Tokyo is going to announce one news is in 2018, I founded a think tank in Washington, D.C. We call it Dialogue China. We focus on China issues. It's not mean I'm going to dialogue with CCP or Chinese government. It means we truly want to have a dialogue with various forces talking about China issues. This is the main purpose of the think tank. We have headquarters in Washington, D.C. Now we have another branch in Taiwan. So today I'm here in Tokyo, and tomorrow we are going to announce we will have a branch of this think tank in Japan. Branches in Australia, New Zealand, and South Korea. That's my main purpose, but in past months, many things happened. Xi Jinping take his power as the third term, and young generation suddenly go to the street, and Jiang Zemin died. So many things happened, make me very busy actually. I just want to give a short remark, talk about my feeling about this. We call it student movement or revolution, I don't know. But I have some feeling, because watching this protest has really brought back my memories of 33 years ago from when I was just a student protesting in the Tiananmen Square. The first feeling that came to my mind when I witnessed the incredible protest across China was the spirit of 1989 has come again after 33 years. People are fed up with the endless lockdown and the stagnant economy. And finally, the death of Urumqi fire sparked people's outrage. So watching videos from internet of Chinese university students chanting, "Give me liberty or give me death," has brought me tears and hopes. I think there are indeed some similarities between 1989 student movement and now. So it's similar because students from Chinese universities are at the front line again this time. So we have the young generation again. This might come as a surprise to a lot of people, because a lot of people think the student nowadays always stray away from politics and focus instead more on other things like getting a better paid job or something else. But because of the inhuman COVID-0 policy and the prospect of Chinese economy resulted from COVID-0, young people were forced to fight for their further well-being. I think they are not only protect or ask for democracy, freedom, human rights. Actually, they request for their future, for their living. They want to survive in this time. So it's not a very abstract idea about democracy and human rights. They have very concrete worry. That's why they go to the street. So I'm very touched to see these young people are leading the protest. In addition, unlike the protests mostly based on specific interests such as land property conflict, the protesters are going right now have more and more focus on systematic change, or you can call it regime change. That inspired me a lot. Because I always think, well, a lot of Western countries talking about human rights situation in China, but they avoid a most important issue is regime change. If there's no regime change, how can you improve human rights record? And many Chinese people, they have a lot of complaint about many things, but they never realize that if there's no regime change, all problems cannot be resolved. But this time, what inspired me is finally our young generation, Chinese people, realized there must be regime change or systematic change. As we have seen in the videos, many people shouted political slogans, which really surprised me. They shout, CCP stepped down, Xi Jinping stepped down. Even in 1989, it's only the last stage of the movement we saw the CCP step down. At the beginning of that movement, we said we follow the step of CCP. But this movement, at the very early stage, they already shouted, CCP stepped down, Xi Jinping stepped down. Seems like suddenly they have this awakening. People's demand is quite similar to what we want 33 years ago in the Tiananmen Square. So at last, probably there's another sad similarity, which is the movement's outcome relies on one man, Deng Xiaoping, in 1989, but this year, maybe the outcome will rely on another single man he called Xi Jinping. However, there are also some differences between now and 1989. One difference is in 1989, we have organization. We have organizers, and I was one of them. But this time, I think young generation learned the lesson from what happened in 1919 in Hong Kong. So they adopted the strategy of we call it be water. So you cannot find any organization. You cannot find any leaders. This is quite different from our strategy back to 33 years ago. It's also different from 1989 because at that time we had a relative open environment and people were already engaging in smaller democratic gathering for years. For example, 1 year before 1989, I already routinely gathered the students, we call it democracy salon at the campus of Peking University. So I already gathering and mobilized. But this time, you don't know where they come from. Nobody knows where they come from. The current protests happened during an increasingly tightening political environment. It's still quite different from 1989. So from 1987 to 1989 is a very liberal time in the history of the PRC. That inspired us to go to the street. But this time is quite different. The environment is very bad. The government, we all expect the government will crack down any protest. Under this circumstance, they went to the street. So I think they are more brave than us. And thanks to 3 decades of Chinese economic growth, the authority has more resources to uprise people now. But they still brave enough to go to the street. People are taking to the street because of the government relentlessness to adapt. This is why I think the people that are protesting today are very brave. And they are absolutely an inspiration to all of us. I hope their action can encourage the next generation or other Chinese peoples. I think the more people go on the street, the more safety people or those protesters have. Currently, the protests still going on mainly on internet. Since it's the first time that Chinese people go on the street all over the country since 1989, it's harder to project what is going to happen next. They seem to stop right now, but we don't know, maybe next week or next 2 weeks, we don't know what will happen. The only thing I can confirm is China has headed into a brand new era. I call it a brand new era. It's quite new. The situation is no longer the same as the past 3 decades. The police has arrested many protesters. The central government still remains silent about the mass protest for now. I think if protesters continues, there may be more conflict between police and the young protesters, just like what we've seen in Hong Kong in 2019. The police in Chinese cities will exercise more brutal repression on the protesters, like Hong Kong police. We also cannot rule out the possibility of a military operation like 33 years ago in Tiananmen Square. I think that possibility is still there. Anyway, it's up to Xi Jinping's man. Some people say the protesters are useless, but I think the protesters will be wiped off and everything will remain. This is not me, but many people think the protesters will be wiped off and everything will remain the same. But I strongly disagree with this cynical opinion. The protests that are going right now across China will have significant influence on China's society, even their crackdown by the CCP. The most important impact that the protests have achieved is communication between large scale of Chinese citizens. Due to strict censorship, Chinese people cannot openly discuss and exchange their opinions on political issues. And now they can do it. So it's difficult for Chinese, in the past decades, it's difficult for Chinese people to organize our coalition based on common beliefs. Mass protests have given Chinese people a chance to communicate with people. And the second important significance, I think, is this is truly a challenge or humiliate to the Xi Jinping himself. It's a heavy blow to his face. It's at his early stage of the 3rd term. I think that will make Xi Jinping very angry and he will feel lost face. So that's why I think maybe eventually he will decide to crack down because he cannot afford the price of losing face. Now Beijing's top security body on Tuesday warned that authorities would crack down on the protests in China. We all know that. And I'm very much worried about the future. The good news is student young generations and Chinese people are not in the street now. So it's not very easy for government to send troops to crack down. So nobody on the street. I predict that maybe in the future they are going to try to arrest more young students or people who they think are organizers, but that might be the next step. So I'm here to appeal for international communities to pay attention to the situation, because my personal experience is if you can draw attention from the international community, your situation in the jail or in the police station will be much better. That's my personal experience. So for international community, our next job is pay attention to those cases, human rights cases, for those protesters who will be arrested for the police and pay attention to their future. It's very important. Yeah, I just stop here, short remark.
Okay, thank you very much for the short speech, and now I will open the floor to questions from journalists first. And while you are preparing your questions, I have one question, basically a follow-up question to what you have said. you mentioned that the new generation acts like water. Could you explain what this means?
Be water.
Yeah, be water.
Be water is come from the experience of Hong Kongers in 2019. That means you cannot find one certain organization to try to organize this protest. There's no this organization. Therefore, there's no leader. It's different from 33 years ago. We have a lot of organizations, a lot of leaders. But this time in Beijing, I don't think CCP can label one person as the leader for the whole protest. It's a very smart strategy, I think.
Do you have an idea how this works? Because they were showing the same white papers. There seem to be some similarities in these protests, but without organization. How do they organize?
It will work because it's situation changed. In 1989, we don't have internet, so we must have individuals as leaders, and we do need organization because we don't have internet to mobilize the people and other students. But now we have the internet, so we actually do not need one single leader. I hear that there are a lot of Telegram group or WeChat group on internet. Many protesters gathering on internet and discuss, use fake ID to discuss what we were going to do. So because we have a new tool of social movement, which is internet, so they can adapt this water strategy. But we cannot take this 33 years ago. Internet is very important.
So, any questions from the floor? First journalists, okay? Then later associate members.
Hi, I'm Natsuko from AFP, French media. So the former Chinese leader Jiang Zemin passed away, and how do you personally feel about it? And the second question is, you talked about possible military intervention and crackdown regarding the current protest in China. So what's your biggest fear? What's your biggest fear, or what's the worst case scenario that you can think of if the Chinese government can no longer take this, thinking that they will lose the face? Thank you.
Yeah. Well, an old man died, but this old man is also part of the group who decided the crackdown of 1989 student movement. So of course, I cannot feel very happy about the old man's death, but I still have my special feeling about this. I think you can understand. But it's interesting for young generations. They feel sad for this man's death because they think Xi Jinping is a good leader, or at least a better leader, because they compare to the Xi Jinping. But for me, of course, he's not an open leader or not a liberal leader compared to Hu Yaobang and Zhao Ziyang. You can say the Chinese government is very successful to cover the history. Young generation know nothing about 1980 of China. So they don't know what a golden time we had. So they only can make a comparison between Jiang Zemin and Xi Jinping. So I know a lot of young people, they really think it's a loss for China. Jiang Zemin's death is a loss for China. I understand why I disagree. But I don't think there will be a very big influence due to his death. Young generation know very little about him. They don't have a true passion for this old man. They just because they did satisfy about Xi Jinping, so that's why they worship Jiang Zemin. But they don't know Jiang Zemin. So that just died. I don't think there will be something happen, or I don't believe the same thing happened 30 years ago when we go to the street for Hu Yaobang and become political movement. I don't think that will happen again. And the second question is, my most worry is they will arrest a lot of young people, and nobody knows. Chinese people need victory, even though it's a very little, we need victory. If a lot of people are arrested, nobody knows. I worry that will disappoint a lot of new protesters or potential protesters. So that's why I think I want to hold this conference, because I really want to call on international media to pay attention and let the world know who are they and what they want. That's very important for inspiring more protest.
You mentioned history. We have one question regarding history from our online community. Ilgin Yilmaz from BBC World Turkish asks, you are both a history maker and now a history scholar. Who decides what history we teach to kids, and how should educators portray and make sense of a nation's past? Is the first question.
How can I teach young generation?
Yeah. So what is?
I really cannot be a teacher again for the social movement. I mean, the environment changed a lot. We don't have internet at our time, so I don't think I can give concrete advice to younger protesters. But we have some experience. I shared my experience on internet already. I made some video speech. I think the most important advice is I think if we want to achieve a goal, we have to step by step. So you cannot hope that you will get what you want just in one day or in one moment. So this is the beginning of a new era. I call it a protest era maybe, but this era will be a long journey. And this is the first step. So I hope the younger generation can realize they cannot get victory in one night.
Nice to meet you again, Dan, after so many years. I'm Dorian Malovic from the French national daily La Croix, based in Tokyo. My question is now, what are the options of Xi Jinping now? I mean, he set up a trap to himself with this zero COVID policy, right? So now, what are the options? Whether to mild a little bit the zero COVID policy with the risk of more infections and many people dying, or stay the same, and then people might still be very angry against him. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a very good question. And my answer is actually I don't know. Even I'm Xi Jinping, I don't know.
That's a good question then.
Yeah, it's really difficult for him to make a decision. If he give up his policy, his authority will be attacked, and he worried about it very much because a lot of the people, even inside the party, not satisfied about his authority. So he cannot afford of losing his face. So I can't imagine how can he give up this zero clearing policy. But otherwise, how can he keep this policy for a long time? I also cannot imagine. If he keep this policy, well, it'll be very easy to predict another protest wave will happen soon. So, well, I can guess, because if you pay attention to these 2 days news from Chinese authority, they are trying to lose some restriction. As my experience about CCP, I think they will have 2 steps. One step, surely they will try to calm down the situation, try to lose a little bit restriction of COVID policy. But I think this is just for short time being. When students go home and when they think they're secure that no more protests will happen, I guess the policy will come back. Just give Xi Jinping's face. So I guess they will have this type. And the next step, if they take back the old policy, and if there's another protest happened, they will very brutally crack down the protest. That's two stages. They always take this two-stage policy.
Okay. Another question from Ilgin. You mentioned. Sorry, you want to do this? No, wait a moment. Okay. Can you? Protesters in China want the government to roll back its strict pandemic policies. The question is, which many blame for trapping those who died in the Urumqi apartment house fire this week. But the rare direct criticism of the China top leadership has raised many eyebrows overseas. How can the media avoid that the coverage is running the risk of painting this organic homegrown movement as foreign interference?
Well, you cannot do this. CCP most likely will use this excuse to crack down student movement or to crack down the protest. They already did that last week. They said that foreign journalists, the BBC's reporter was detained, and that's the signals they will try to use this excuse. And we have some announcements outside of China. I think there will be another excuse for them. Say that those bad guys outside China want to try to make trouble of CCP. So I don't think. Otherwise, we do nothing. Or we do not support. Or we do not pay attention. Otherwise, they will do this. There's no way to avoid this how to say, 风险, this. Yeah.
Okay, another question from the floor? No? Oh yeah, please.
Richard Solomon from Beacon Reports. Just a quick question. If you could talk a little further, you say that the students are not particularly concerned about democracy. They're concerned about overturning the one leadership system. Can you bring that together a little more? Thank you.
Yeah, that's concern about Xi Jinping himself, because for the past 10 years, the people, I think, they feel very disappointed about Xi Jinping's policy. But people still have a hope that after 10 years, Xi Jinping will step down. Even those middle class, they have this hope. That's the only hope for the people. Think after 10 years, they will step down. But Xi Jinping got the third term. And we all predict that he will have the fourth team, maybe fifth team. I think that make young generation desperate. They have no hope for the future. So that's why they go to street. If they have, I mean, Chinese people, if they have only a very little hope, they will not go to street. So from this protest, you can say, Chinese people, maybe they push it to the corner. They have no choice. They have to stand up, but there's no hope for them. I mean, only hope is Xi Jinping step down peacefully, but he didn't do that.
Okay. Did it answer your question? Okay, then another question from online. Anthony Trotter of ABC News asks, these protests in China that we are seeing now, will they work? Will they affect political change in China?
Yes, it will. It will change China a lot, I think. Well, this is the first time after 33 years people shouted the slogan like CCP step down. I think this is very important for the future, because if there's one person brave enough to shout this kind of slogan, that will inspire more people to follow. It's very important for any movement, social movement, to let one brave person to lead the protest. And this happened in this movement. So I predict in the future there are more protesters will follow this kind of brave actions. That's one thing. Another thing is, in the past 30 years, there's a myth that younger generation or middle class, they really satisfied about the government. But this protest tell us the truth. No, there's no this kind of correlation between the government and the people. Actually, the people already feel angry about the government. So this is a big significance of this movement. It reveals the truth. The truth is it's not a harmony society already. There's already a lot of conflict between society and the government. That's very important. I think that's a signal for a new era. I call it a disorder or protest era. Cover next 10 years maybe.
Sorry. I'm sorry to ask another question, Dan, but with what you just said about the political landscape today and Xi Jinping, whatever happened, I mean, they want Xi Jinping to step down, to change. My question is there any more liberal alternative to Xi Jinping behind the screen? Which is very difficult to believe that you have more Democrats or liberal somewhere in China today at the top level.
Is there any other officials?
Alternative, yes, political alternative, seeing what happened to the Politburo after the Congress. So, you know, Hu Jintao is very, okay, he's on the side, and Jiang Zemin died, so what are the forces?
We just published announcement. We write a public lecture to 3 persons. One is Li Zhanshu, who is the head of People's Congress, and Li Keqiang as Premier Minister, and Wang Yang as a potential candidate for the Premier Minister. I personally think at least they are more liberal than Xi Jinping. And I think a lot of Chinese people predict that they will take place of Xi Jinping's group, I mean, so-called 团派, Youth League. Anyway, the Wang Yang, Li Keqiang, a lot of Chinese people still have hope for them. So maybe the best outcome is there's some disagreement happened inside the party, and if Xi Jinping criticized by other top leaders, they still there. I mean, Wang Yang and Li Keqiang push Xi Jinping to criticize himself. That's a big victory. But I personally think that will not happen. Yeah, because the Xi Jinping already take all the power. Most important is the military. He had already controlled the military. So I don't believe that happened. But this movement give me a lesson. You cannot predict everything. There's always something suddenly happen, just like what happened in former Russia. It's just everything happened just in one night. So I don't know. But I hope that's the best outcome. Then Xi Jinping stepped down. That will give China a chance to start again.
Okay, then. Yeah, please.
Thank you. You mentioned the term of...
Can you introduce yourself, please?
Pardon?
Can you introduce yourself by name?
Koichi Kitabatake, associate member. You use the term of regime change, and I'd like to know the regime change is a regime under the framework of the communism or under the framework of the globalism or capitalism, or what is your personal opinion? What is the ideal regime for China now?
Thank you. My personal idea, of course, is the political system should be based on constitution. So my personal belief is constitutionalism. Everything you must rule by law, rule for the people, not like this, not like today's China. So they're very simple. I don't have a very abstract idea like democracy, freedom. I think constitution is very important, and that's the main. How to say? What we want to do in the United States, I mean, our think tank, is try to prepare a new constitution for the future China, if that will come. But we don't know when and how it will happen. But we must do preparation. And what we are prepared for is a new constitution. So I think that's the one single thing I focus.
Yeah, please. Go ahead.
日本カメラ from the Yomiuri newspaper. I have a question. When the Tiananmen incident happened, in the first stage, Chinese government didn't react the public harshly, but later become harder. I feel that the same thing is happened about demonstration against zero COVID. How do you think about it?
I think this time will be same in 1989. I mean, they have a soft policy first, try the temple, and if they are still protest, next time they will use military. This model were used again in this time. So the outcome will decided on those protesters, if they will continue to protest. If they continue, I worry they will be harder.
Looking at another difference, maybe or similarity, I don't know, please tell me, to 89 is that this time there were also big workers' protests in the Foxconn factory in Zhengzhou, I think. Do you think that there's a connection, or is this just a correlation?
I can't say there's a correlation between these protesters with workers. You know, Fushikang's workers, they have very specific requests for their own money or for their own benefit. But those protesters, they have a high-level request for the systematic change. So you can never say, at least they didn't communicate very, very good.
So there's no connection with it.
I don't think so.
But if you look at the public unrest in China, where also now workers go to the street, like at the Foxconn factory, in battles with the police, do you think that this discontent is much more widespread in the Chinese, among the Chinese people?
I mean
the discontent with it.
But in the whole history of PRC, we never see any one single protest initiated by workers. I don't know the reason exactly, but that's the fact. There's no. Maybe in the future we'll have, but right now I can't see any signal that the workers will stand up and fight for democracy. It's hard to imagine.
But how widespread do you think is this feeling of desperation you mentioned, also among other, not the students, but also
middle class is very important. For the past 30 years, the most important supporting force of CCP's policy is the middle class. So it's just against any prediction of Western countries. They all think that the middle class, when they have money, they will push for democracy. But on the contrary, middle class always support the government. But this pandemic changed a lot. See what happened in Shanghai. Shanghai is a city, there are a lot of middle class gathering, and finally, because of the pandemic, they know there's no secure for them, including their property, their money, or the chance of making money. Not secure. If government wants to lock down, they can lock down. They can do anything. I think that awakening a lot of middle class. That's why many middle class start to we call it run, to try to run out of China. You can say that's why I think they're desperate for the future. They have only one choice, just run. But think about those people who cannot run. That's why they go to street.
We got another question also from Libyan again. Minjin Pei, professor of government at Claremont McKenna College, has recently said that China's middle class anger maybe, you just mentioned. Where were these middle class Chinese all these years as Xi Jinping gained power? Did the government really buy off this class by with rising incomes and telling them to keep quiet as long as they were getting richer?
Well, I think the situation is like this. One reason of China can make such a rapid economy growth because they cooperate with middle class. They encourage middle class making money. That lead China to a high-speed economic growth. But now, you cannot always keep this economy, because the economy slowed down. The conflict between middle class and government eventually will happen. When government lack of money, they will try to get money from middle class. That's what happened on Ma Yun. And Ma Yun's case awakened a lot of middle class. They all realize that sooner or later government will get their money. So that's why I think that's what happened now in China. Just because the economy slowed down. I mean, after 1989, there's only one thing can support the authority of CCP is economic growth. When this disappeared, that will be the end of CCP's rule.
Yeah, please.
Hi, this is Chisako Tanaka from Associated Press. Do you think this movement will further gain momentum and turn into something big, or if that's not the case, why do you think that's not the case? Or if you think this will turn into something big, why would that be?
Now we can see the protesters are already back to home or back to school now. I actually don't know what will happen for the next 2 weeks because there's no leaders, so I don't know where can I get information about what will happen next week. So I really don't know. Anything is possible.
Okay, looking at China at this situation, the current times, do you think that there are also ruptures within the Communist Party, in the government system, especially very big conflicts? Will there be conflicts between the central government and the local governments? Because the central government is trying to push a lot of costs for these COVID measures onto the local governments, at the same time basically depriving the local governments of their main income source, which is sales of real estate.
So the political situation already back to the Mao era, and every power is taken by Xi Jinping himself. Of course, the local government has a lot of complaints, and they short of money, they need support from the central government. So I don't think there's a willingness of local government to try to do something against the policy of Xi Jinping.
Why not?
Well, if they do that, they will lose their job. And you can say Xi Jinping, even Hu Jintao have some disagreement, just let Hu Jintao get out of the conference. So no, in Hebei province, Shijiazhuang, they did try to change the policy a little bit 1 or 2 weeks ago. And very quick, the central government criticized the Shijiazhuang, the local government, and they have to reverse their policy. So nobody dared to against the weakness of Xi Jinping. That's why people feel desperate, because they think if Xi Jinping is still there, nobody can change. This is not like in the 1980s. It's already, Xi Jinping already become an emperor. He decided everything.
So, any other questions? George?
I'm working for Swiss television. My name is Baumgartner. To distract the people and maybe to get the support of part of Chinese population, Xi Jinping might use the nationalist card and threaten again to invade Taiwan. What do you think? And second point is the hard line of the United States against China now. Can it benefit the students who are demonstrating?
You mean CCP benefit from? What was the
No,
second
can,
question?
you know, the Americans now have taken a very tough line against China regarding trade and so on. Do you think the attitude of the United States vis-à-vis China now can encourage the students to try to change the regime?
The first question is what I'm worrying. I really think so not only because this protest is naturally the Xi Jinping's ambition to take Taiwan back, and only by taking Taiwan back he can have longer term of control. So I do believe that Xi Jinping will attack Taiwan in short future, even though I don't know when. But a lot of international experts predict this will happen. Unfortunately, the Taiwanese people do not believe this, except the Taiwanese people, all the people believe, and especially Chinese people believe Xi Jinping will do that. But we don't know when, and I think that will not happen very soon, because he has to settle down the power arrangement and try to resolve the problem of pandemic. But when all this passed, the next thing for Xi Jinping is to try to deal with Taiwan problem. That's why I moved back to Taiwan and try to stand with Taiwanese people together. Secondly, I don't think U.S.'s attitude will change a lot. And actually, a lot of the young generation, young protesters, they are very be careful about the participate of foreign influence, because you know CCP government usually use this to attack protesters. So I already tried to persuade some foreign forces to interfere in these affairs, to let them fight for themselves. If we say allowed, maybe we will give government an excuse. And those protesters, they also have this worry. So I wish U.S. government should be careful on this issue. But they must pay attention, and if there's crackdown, they have to stand up.
You mentioned we have to pay attention, but if basically we don't know the leaders, and these leaders are being basically arrested in their own homes, we will never learn about them, right? So how can we basically, how can we pay attention?
That's very a technical question. But my suggestion is we have a lot of Chinese people live outside China. They have a lot of connection with people inside China. So foreign countries, foreign government, or other human rights groups, they can try to get information from people who live outside China. For example, we have a lot of Telegram group or even WeChat group. And there are a lot of information flow in those groups. I at least take part in 6 or 7, I forget, 7 or 8 groups. So every day I get a lot of information. If FBI asks me, or if CECC of the US Congress asks me, I can deliver a lot of information to them. And not only me, there are a lot of Chinese people. They pay attention to situations. They know more than US people. So they can be a bridge between foreign concerns and the civil society in China.
One question of Ilyin was, I put it, frame it a little bit differently, but what can foreign governments do to influence China, the Chinese government?
One very easy measure is, there are a lot of money in the bank of the United States or in other countries. Those money belong to those high-level officials. This is a leverage for Western countries to threaten Chinese officials don't do too much. This one thing, and also defending Taiwan is another way. Because if you let Xi Jinping take Taiwan back, it will be more difficult for Western countries to stop Xi Jinping's ambition. So stay together and show support to defend Taiwan is important, not only for Taiwan issue, it's for China issue. And I also think, or maybe we have, for a long time, we have a misconcept because now China issue, I think China issue already become a China problem. The whole world must face China problem, it's not China issues. So defending Taiwan is one way to resolve this China problem.
I wonder, as long as no other questions from the floor, I will ask another one. Yeah, please.
My name is Kay, staff writer of Business Insider. I have one question. In 1989, Tiananmen Square movement was triggered by the death of Hu Yaobang. Do you think Jiang Zemin's death will be spark for today's movement to become like 1989?
Thank you. I don't think so. No, Hu Yaobang really has love from the Chinese people. It's really kind of love. It's not personal love, it's political love. And Hu Yaobang get support from young generation at that time. We really feel sad for his death. But today's younger generation, I don't think they really love Jiang Zemin because they know nothing about Jiang Zemin. They just hate Xi Jinping, and that's the only reason they feel sad for the death of Jiang Zemin. That's not enough to push them to the street.
And you mentioned the Taiwan issue. You mentioned also nationalism in China. There are some experts who say that even these protesters might be liberally minded, but still very nationalist. And according to some opinion polls or to some assessments, actually the support for a Taiwan invasion in the middle class in China is also relatively high. How do you see this role of nationalism for the future development of China and for shaping maybe this protest movement?
I think we should be very careful to evaluate nationalism in China. Is there really many passionate nationalists? I doubt it, actually. Because this is only one political issue Chinese people can show their passion. And they're brainwashed by the government for a long time. But if there's conflict between government and the Chinese people, that will maybe will push the young generation to think a different way. If they believe the government treated them for a long time. Then maybe we'll change their attitude. That's one thing. Another thing is, well, if there's really a lot of nationalists, young nationalists in China, why so many middle class and young generation want to go to other country to study or just move permanently? If they really love this country, if they are real nationalists. So that's why I think we must be very careful. If we look at the internet, just atmosphere, looks like many people support to take back Taiwan, but I doubt that's true or not. The government now, Chinese government now, they're really very much, they know how to use internet, how to use disinformation, fake phenomena to try to influence the people's mind, or try to influence the judgment of other countries. But I always persuade the friend in US, and I personally don't believe Chinese people really care Taiwan issue so much. They have their own problem everywhere. If there's democracy, they're very busy to care about their own benefit. And Taiwan is so far away. I doubt they really want to. I doubt this support.
Okay. If there's no question, we are also reaching the end of our event. In this case, okay, let me close the event for today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Custom in our club, I also want to present 1 year honorary membership to you. So
once again,
when you come back, please
thank you.
have lunch with us, coffee.